Okay, so you should have some of the formulas that you got from the video and the vocab that I had you write down yesterday. So we're just going to work through like 4 of the problems, and then you'll try like we've been doing, where you have a packet where you'll refer back to the notes to do it. Okay. So there are more than one way, just like in all math, to do things. Okay. So one way tends to be easier for others. Sometimes the easier one takes longer. Okay. Others, if you can memorize like a formula, then that's probably the faster way. So on this first one, I'm going to show both ways. Okay, and you can kind of make up your mind what you want to do and what you can remember. Okay, and you'll find out which one's easier once you start memorizing it. Okay, so if you're using a number line, it's probably okay when you have smaller numbers. Okay, but you wouldn't want to have to find the distance between, bless you, like a negative 99 and a positive 125 and have to make all those tick marks and hoping you didn't miss a tick mark, and then you end up counting those tick marks in between those 2 coordinates to try to find the distance, right? That wouldn't probably make sense to be using a number line. You'd probably want to use the formula. But this one would probably be okay. It's definitely, again, going to be slower than just memorizing the formula, okay? But if you forget, just drop it, okay? All right, so we have 2 coordinates. So we have a -4 and a positive 12. Okay, so I graphed it on a number line. So numbers to the left, we know, go to the negative direction. Numbers to the right, go in a positive direction. So if you drew a number line and plotted those points, then you can count. You just start at one of them, one or the other. Okay, doesn't matter. You're just finding the distance in between. Okay, so I can start from here. So remember, you don't start counting until you move. I can't like stay here and say that's 1, right? You actually have to move before you can start counting. Or it's not like that. And I think the example that I used last year with you guys when we did this, we talked about the distance between the high school and McDonald's. And if you're traveling to McDonald's, you've got a straight line, like a number line. And they say it's 5 miles going to McDonald's. Oh my gosh, put your phone up. If you're going to McDonald's, it's a straight line. You go 5 miles to McDonald's, right? Okay, well, if I'm coming back, it's still 5 miles. So it doesn't matter if I start with the 4 or if I start with the 12. It's still the same distance in between. Okay, you just pick which one you're going to start with. Okay, so I'm going to start with the, oh my gosh, it's still up. Start right here, and I'm counting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so I would say my distance is 16. Okay, so that's one way, as long as you're not losing track of the tick marks and have all the right tick marks, so the distance in between. Okay, so using a number line. The second way is to actually look at them as coordinates. Okay, so we're going to fill this in. So another way to find the distance. I'm not sure if they use this. Do they use A and B? Do you guys have your vocab in front of you? On distance formula, use A minus B and B minus A, which would have been your vocab or formula for distance. Yeah? Okay. So I just want to make sure. It really doesn't matter. It's just saying you have 2 different coordinates. So they use the variables A and B. It could have been X and Y. Okay? So that part really doesn't matter. So another way to find distance is you're going to take your 2 coordinates, whatever those 2 coordinates are, okay, and you're going to subtract them. Okay, we just talked about it. It doesn't matter if you're starting at a high school and going to McDonald's, or if you're starting at McDonald's going back to high school. This means the exact same thing. Okay, you're subtracting the 2. What are these bars called? Remember from last year? It starts with an A. When you have bars that go around absolute value. So it means that whatever you're doing inside, if you get a positive or a negative, when it comes outside of the absolute value, it's always positive, okay? So distance is always positive. So it didn't matter if I started with a -4 or the 12, okay? The distance in between is still going to be 16, okay? Not a -16, okay? Okay, so we're going to try it. So we're going to actually use those formulas. So I'm going to start with the -4. Okay, so -4 was my coordinate, and I'm just calling it A. This subtraction doesn't take place of a negative that's attached to the number. Okay, so don't change it to a positive 12. Okay, I'm still subtracting 12. Okay, so a negative 4 minus 12, inside the absolute value, that would still be a negative what? Negative 4 minus 12. Signs are the same, so you would have negative 16. But when it comes out of the absolute value, it changes to a positive 16. Okay, signs are the same, so we add, take the sign a larger number, the 12 is the larger number, so it's negative 16. Okay, so now we're just going to show that it doesn't matter if I would have started with the 12. Okay, so I'm starting with B as my coordinate, so that was a positive 12, right? Not a negative 12, so positive 12. But I still subtract my other coordinate. What was my other coordinate? Negative 4. That does not take place of this. Okay, it's a minus negative 4. So what is our rule when we have double negatives? Add, right? They both, negative times negative changes into a positive, so those both change to add. Okay, so now I'm going 12 plus 4, which is 16. So inside the absolute value it's 16, but when it comes out it's a positive 16. Okay, so regardless if I started with the negative 4 or if I started with the positive 12, this formula gets you the same number as long as you're paying attention to your signs. Okay, 16 or 16. So it doesn't matter which one you start with. Okay, so we're scrolling down from there. Okay, and we are going to find the midpoint. Okay, so a couple ways to do this. I'm going to scroll back up. I was just going to let you write that real quick. Write this and then give yourself, yeah, just one line in between, and then write this so that I can talk about both of them. And that says, find the midpoint. It's just a fraction bar. We're going to put something above and below. Equals, and then we're going to put the answer here. This is marks away. And then the next one down is midpoint. Okay, so a couple ways to do this. Okay, we're going to look at both of them. So finding the midpoint. So if I know the distance or the length of a string, and I want to find where the middle is at, okay, the middle would mean I'm cutting that number in what? Half, okay? So if I know the distance of it, 16, right, and I divide it into 2, I can find out where the halfway mark is at. That doesn't give me the coordinate. It just it tells me the distance, equal distance away from each end. Okay? So 16 divided by 2 is going to give me 8. So it's 8 marks away on the number line, either from McDonald's or from the high school. You'll find out what that coordinate is. So if you're using the number line. So let me go back up here, and I'll come back down to this so you can write this. Okay, so we're trying to find out where the middle on this number line is at. Okay, so the distance is 16, and I know halfway between 16 is 8. Okay, so you can count 8 from this direction or 8 from this direction to find out what that coordinate is. Okay, so it does not matter. We're just trying to find the location. Okay, the actual coordinate of it. Okay, so if I started from this one, from -4, and counted over here. Okay, I'd go, don't count until I start moving, so it's 8 away, so this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is where it landed, okay? So now I can check from the other side too, just to make sure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it wound up at the same spot, okay? So now you just look to see what is the coordinate of that location, okay? So if 0 is at the red line and you're going to the right, it's going to be a positive what? 4. Okay, so that is the coordinate of your midpoint. Okay, so we're scrolling down. Okay, and where you have midpoint right there, the actual coordinate of the midpoint is 4. Okay, now looking at this number, what could I have done to this number to find the location? Divided by 2. Okay. So another thing that you can do, I don't want to go back up, but just pretend like these are all my hash marks that are in the number line. If I have the 2 coordinates, okay, this would be another way, then to find the middle, then I can just cover up with my hands, okay, until I get to the middle to find where that middle one is at as well, if you're not like counting, because it should be the even amount if it's in the middle, right? Same distance this way as it would be this way. So you could cover up, okay? So the other one is the formula, okay? Now I'm not sure, vocab-wise, did they use X and Y? Because that is another way. X and Y. Okay, so the one that's on your vocab, like you need to know this for when you are trying to find the middle of a line that is like on a graph, like it's slanted. So if you have an X and Y axis, don't write this. I'm just telling you when you would use that X and Y. So if you had an X and a Y axis and they plotted like a line that was on there and you're trying to find the location of the middle of that line, then that's when you would use the X and the Y one, okay? This is the same thing. We're just going to be combining the X's, okay? We only have one set of coordinates versus having some X's and some Y's. So when you're doing this, right, they're going to give you an X and a Y and a X and a Y. Oh, Lord, yeah. So then you would combine the X's and you would combine the Y's. We just don't have 4 different points on a number line. We just have 2, okay? So the formula is to take one of your coordinates, so the A, and the other coordinate, which was the B, okay? And we would, it's different than distance. Distance is subtracting. We would add them, okay? And then divide by 2. Okay, so we're going to actually do that on this one, and then we'll be done. Okay, so the coordinates of one of them was what? What was the coordinate on that number line? Negative 4. Okay, so I have a negative 4, and we just said that we're doing what in between? Adding, so I put a plus. And then the coordinate for the second one? 12. Might be my coordinates. Okay, and then we divide it by 2. Okay, so a negative 4 plus 12 is what? 8. Okay. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, and that was the coordinate of our midpoint. Let's write midpoint, just so we know that that's the coordinate of our midpoint. Okay, so that's why I was saying, sometimes the number line's great if you can't remember formulas. But if you can remember formulas, this is a lot faster. Okay? Because you just need to remember on distance you're subtracting, which seems weird, but you're subtracting. And then on midpoints you're adding. Okay, and dividing it 2 because you're finding the middle. Okay, so that's it for number 11. That was number 11. Okay, so number 14. Okay, so the question reads, M is the midpoint of PQ. Okay, so we have M is in the middle of a segment PQ, so it means it's been split evenly to the left and to the right. This amount is the same. So from P to M, it's the same as it would be from M to Q. Okay, so they tell us the coordinate for P is 1, the midpoint is 8. We're trying to figure out what this coordinate is. Okay. So using the formula, I'm going to do that first, and then we'll talk about the number line one if you choose to use that. Using the formula for midpoint, we do what with the 2 coordinates? Add them. Okay, so this one and this one, we add them and divide by 2, and that gives us the midpoint. So we're writing a formula, okay? So my first coordinate is 1. I'm adding my second coordinate, which I don't know what it is, because that's what I'm trying to solve for. But you said we divide by 2, and that would give me my midpoint. Well, they tell us what the midpoint answer should be, which is 8. Okay, so it's coordinates, you don't have to write this, it just reminds you. So coordinate 1 plus coordinate 2 divided by 2 would give me the midpoint. So we're just rewriting it and putting the numbers of the ones that they gave us. Okay, so they gave us one coordinate, we don't know the other coordinate. We divide that by 2, and that would give us our midpoint, and they told us the answer to that. So we're solving for the other coordinate. Does that make sense? We just rewrote it. Okay, so in algebra, to solve for x, what would I need to do with that 2? To get rid of it, to move it to the other side. Multiply, because it's divide by 2, right? And the opposite, divide by 2 would be to multiply. So when I take it to the other side and multiply it, I would have 16. Okay, so last step to solve for x would be what? Subtract the 1, right? Because the opposite's the plus 1, so I subtract 1. So x is equal to 15. So x is my other coordinate. So the coordinate for q would be 15. Okay, I don't want you to write this. Okay, I just want you to listen. Okay, so if you're choosing not to remember the formula, or like, yeah, I have no idea how to set this one up, we know if it's the middle, right? If it's the middle, then I know the what about this distance. It's the same, right? So in between here, so when I'm counting from 1, whatever I'm counting over, then that means that from here, I should be able to go the same distance over this way, okay? So that it would wind up at 15. Okay, so what would I be adding to the right of 8 to get 15? 7, right? Because I would have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. Okay, so the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this would be my 7th one. So if you count it over, that would give you your coordinate for 15. Okay, so again, number line is an option. If you're like, yeah, I'm not sure if I remember the formulas, by the time you take the test, you can use a number line. Okay, you just need to know midpoint means exactly in the middle. Okay, next one. Okay, and you don't have to underline between. I just want you to remember this from our last notes. Remember when we talked about something being in the middle and then something actually being in between. We don't know where it's located. So this is not the midpoint. It's just somewhere in between. So don't get that confused with midpoint. Because midpoint would mean it's equal length. I'm hungry. Okay, while you're still writing, I'm just going to talk about something. So don't write this. So remember the last section where we had the true and false ones, and they would say like A, I'm just making up letters, B, and C, and they would say B is somewhere in between A and C, right? And so we don't know if it's exactly in the middle or if it's like this on a number line, okay? Because B is still in between, but it's not in the middle. So be careful on midpoint would mean it's in the middle, so then the distance from here to here and the distance from here to here are equal, where this one is not, okay? So between does not mean the middle. So don't get that confused with midpoint. Okay, so let C be between D and E. Okay, so we have D and E, and C is somewhere in between. We don't know where. Okay, so visually, this is what we're looking at, and this refers to your vocab word, or yeah, it was in the vocab section where I think you had, like it was drawn like this, and then you had these two, and then this one up above, and it had a plus in between. Okay, that's the part it's referring to. Okay, so sometimes they will give you the two small segments, the lengths of the two small segments. So if I wanted to find out what the length of DE is, what would I do with those two small segments? Add them, right? If they give me the big segment and then only give me one of the small ones, and they want us to find the other one, what would we do? Subtract, we do the opposite, right? So sketching this to know if they give you the too small, the too big, so that you know where it goes. Okay, because we add the two small ones to get the big one. Okay, so draw that. Okay, so we had B and D and somewhere in between is C. So it says use the segment addition to solve for Y. Okay, so DC is that one. Okay, is the small one, and then CE is the other small one. What did you say we do with the two small ones to get the big one? Add them. So we're going to write an equation. So 5y plus 8 plus the other small one, which is 4y plus 10, equals the total, and they actually told us the total, which is 27. So if it was different, and like this was DC and this was CE, then this would be over here, and then the CE would be on the right side. So you just got to know which one's which, okay? So the two small ones we add and set it equal to whatever they tell us the big one is. Okay, so using algebra, combining your like terms, so 5y and 4y would give me 9y. Remember, we don't do opposites because they're already on the same side together. You only do opposites when you move it into the other side. So then we have 8 and 10, so that would give me 18. Okay, what's our next step? Subtract 18. Okay, so now I have 9y equals what? 9. Okay, so our last step would be to what? Divide it. So y is what? 1. Okay, and that's what they want us to solve for. So y is 1. 9 divided by 9. Okay, so the only thing I can think of is just be careful. Make sure you're adding the two that should be added together and setting it equal to the proper one. Not just guessing, because it won't always just be in that order. Okay? Okay, last one. And this is the easiest one, instead of starting with the easiest one. Okay, when you go to write this problem out, just either choose one or the other. So the number line or the formula. I'm going to do both. If you want to write both, you can write both. I just want to make sure you've got both of the options and know what you're doing. Some of you won't even need to write these out. Like, you're going to know what you're supposed to do inside your head, and you can do it in your head and write the answer down without even having to write the formula or the number line out. Okay, so distance wasn't midpoint. Midpoint, remember, we added and divided by 2. Distance, you what? Subtract. Okay, so if we're using the number line, right, then I can start at either the A coordinate or the B coordinate, doesn't matter, and then once you start moving is when you start counting, right? So that's one option, okay? So the other one was to do the absolute value and subtract. Okay, and I'm just showing both ways so that you know you get the same answer, and that's a good way to actually check your work and make sure you're right. So first one, my first coordinate is -9. Okay, you said I subtract, and what's my second coordinate? 6. So a -9 minus 6, signs are the same, so I add, take the sign of the larger number, So 9 and 6 would be 15. So when it comes out, make sure we always write when it's distance. Distance is always positive. This is just talking about how far away it is. Okay, so if I started with the other one, I'd get the same thing. So if I started with B, it'd be 6 minus my other coordinate, which is a negative 9, which changes it to a positive, right? So 6 plus 9 is 15, which when it comes out is 15, okay? So it doesn't matter which one you choose. Okay, so some of you will say, oh, it's distance I'm subtracting, and be able to do this in your head. So negative 9 minus 6, well, that gives me a negative 15, but I know it's supposed to be changed to a positive, okay? I won't need to see your work. So you can do the work, but we're just going to be checking answers. So those that can do it in your head, then do it in your head, okay? So if you need to draw it out, you've got more than one option. We good? Okay. So that's a couple of objectives. All so you don't need to do those ones on this. You're just going to do the ones that are left, and then we'll grade it maybe tomorrow. Just so many people got it. I don't know. I liked it. I don't know. Someone might appreciate that too. One that I wanted to point out on here, because I wanted you to try this on your own. I didn't want to do it with you because we always have a fear of fractions. Look at number 13. Okay, they want you to find the midpoint. Remember, midpoint is adding, right? Adding and dividing by 2. So you need to change those into mixed numbers. Well, actually, no, you don't have to change them. You can change them into mixed numbers. That is one way to do it, okay? You don't have to, but when we're adding with fractions, we have to have a common what? Denominator. So what is our common denominator on 13? 10. Okay, so you'll need to change those, okay? And we're going to add them, but then when we keep the fraction, dots, and then flip. If I have a fraction that I'm dividing by 2, okay? Let me write this. Actually, let's do this one. Okay, let's do number 13. And I'm going to write them above and below. It just helps me with borrowing and carrying and stuff like that. So I have 3 and 2/5 that I'm adding. Because remember, it doesn't matter which one I start with. You just have our 2 coordinates. And I have a negative. So we're adding, but it's a negative number. So I'm going to change this to a negative. Because it is a negative number. Because if you had this, right? It's the same as subtracting. Okay, so I'm just going to write it down here, subtracting. So negative 1 and 1 half. Okay, so you said our common denominator was what? 10. So that means I multiply this by 5, and this by 5, and this one by 2, and that one by 2. Good? Okay, so I have 3 and 4 tenths minus 1 and 5 tenths. Okay, so 5 from 4, can I do that? Can I take 5 away from 4? Can I subtract 5 from 4? No. So we borrow, right? So when I borrow from here, this makes this a 2. And I borrowed 1. So if my common denominator is 10, what needs to go onto the top that would make this equivalent to 1? 10, right? 10 over 10? Okay, so I need to add that to that what numerator is already there. So rewriting this would be 2 and 14 tenths minus 1 and 5 tenths. Now I can subtract. So 5 from 14, 9, so 9 tenths, right? And then 1 from 2 would be 1. Okay, so it looks like this. 1 and 9 tenths that I'm dividing by 2. Okay, what do I need to do to this guy? Improper. So times and add. So 10 times 1 is 10 plus 9 would be 19 over 10. What do I do with these guys? Keep dots and flip. So what is the flip over here? 1 over 2. now you can do it. So if it can cross cancel, if it can't, then just go straight, which this one can't. So it'll just go straight across. So 19 times 1 would be 19, and then 10 times 2 would be 20. Okay. So again, if your fractions, not your memory, so if you need to write that one, I'll leave that one up on the board. So I guess you obviously don't need to do 13 because that answer is given to you. But you have 16 is one like that, 25, 36. There's a couple of them on there. Okay.